Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. It's very nice to see you all. I'm Krista. Welcome to Little Shop of Stories. This is one of our most favorite author events of the year because it is our very own Terra Elan McVoy, and I am super excited about Criminal. I know, yay! I'm super excited about Criminal. I've read all of Terra's books, of course, and I think they're all amazing. There's something extra special about Criminal. I think everyone who's read it would agree that it's just so gritty and intense and dark and compelling, and it's really, really awesome. So if you guys haven't read it yet, you're in for such a treat, and if you have, then you know what I'm talking about. But we also have a very special guest today, and that is Miss Anica, and she's here all the way from New York. She's Terra's editor and best friend, and so they're going to be talking a little bit about the process of writing and what it looks like for them to sort of collaborate on a project. So join me in welcoming them both.
Thank you. Oh my God. It's really overwhelming that you guys are all here. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, and you, and you, and you. It's awesome. Thank you for coming. So most of my book release parties here are usually some sort of circus with like talent show and magic tricks and dancing girls. And since Criminal is a little bit more serious and a little bit more, come on, there's empty seats, come on in, hi. We wanted to do something that would be interesting and fun, but also a little bit more serious. So that's why Anica's here, and we're going to talk together about our process and the evolution from pure to Criminal. So the first thing...
I don't think how beautiful that is, and we titled it.
So I thought what we would do first is talk together, would tell you all how we met, actually. So in 2001, I moved to New York and got a job at Scholastic as an editorial assistant. And I remember very clearly, in January was when I got hired in 2002, which was...
Me too.
When she also got hired. And I don't remember when we met, but I remember that I was making coffee because I was the girl who had to make coffee. And this tall girl who also had a shaved head, because I had a shaved head, went walking across the hall, and I was like, who is that girl? I need to know that girl.
But you were the girl in the buzz cut and like the poodle skirts and the heels, and I wasn't.
I do picture that you had some sort of long skirt and combat boots, but I'm not sure if I'm just confusing with Sinead O'Connor there.
Hope not.
So eventually...
But instant crush.
Yeah,
on both
instant
sides.
crush, very
You were my
much
work
so.
crush for sure.
And eventually we got cubicles right next to each other, which we weren't working in the same department, but we got cubicles right next to each other, which meant that then we could sort of start to have conversations about things like when you had to get that new mattress and the stress about that getting
That
delivered.
was super stressful. I'm so glad you were there.
And so we became pals, and we both really like to cook, and so we often would trade baked goods together. I remember a particularly good chocolate cheesecake that you made and shared with me one time. And so we became
The cooking
buds.
process involved a lot of treats, is
Yes.
what she's saying.
There's a lot of sugar. And part of when I was at Scholastic, I was reading a whole lot of young adult, and it was by reading that young adult stuff is where I started to get the idea for Pure. Not pure as it was, but I knew I wanted to write something about teenagers who were trying to be teenagers and also people of faith at the same time. And it was a side project that I was just doing at home at night on my own because I wanted to. And one of the dates that we went on together was before I moved to Atlanta, was we went to go see Saved, which was awesome, and we had a really good time. And I remember walking around Union Square talking about the movie and that movie really sort of making me feel like there was maybe something to this idea that I had, that maybe there was a way to talk about this. And then I moved away.
And I cried a lot.
But then you came to visit. And I had been talking to Anica about this manuscript idea that I was working on, especially that night when we saw Saved. And so when Anica came to visit, you should tell them what you brought with you.
I brought with me a bunch of articles about purity rings because I'd been reading about those and thinking there needs to be a YA book about this, and exactly the person to write this is Terra Elan McVoy, because I had read Terra's short stories. She had told me on this, after this saved date where we landed at a cozy and we're drinking tea, and she was telling me about real girls, not gossip girls, and why there weren't enough books about them at the time, and about being in chorus and what it meant to go to church or not go to church in the community where she grew up. We had a lot of talks about that kind of thing, and I wanted someone to write a book about purity rings who could take the religious aspects seriously, talk about the sex part in a smart way, who knew about the friendships. And as soon as I told Terra about the phenomenon of purity rings, she knew immediately what this book was about in a way that I hadn't even thought of.
So we went to Flying Biscuit, and we sat down and immediately drew out, and I still have the notes of who was whose best friend, and Nika's always really great about asking the right questions, and how are these people connected. And for me with Pure, I knew right away that I didn't want it to be about whether or not someone was going to lose their virginity. I wanted that to have already happened, and then we're going to deal with the aftermath. So we did that, and we actually went out together. Remember this so clearly. We went out together that night after we had developed the book, and then I tucked in Nika to bed, and I went upstairs to my office, and I started writing what is actually the opening scene of Pure. And
almost exactly the same. We took out some adjectives.
Right. So then I knew, oh God, I'm really going to end up writing this book. So we did. It took a year and more before it was ready. And in the meantime, Nika had moved from Scholastic to Simon Pulse.
And in the meantime, we'd killed off a character.
We did have to kill off a character. Poor Polly. One day she will be resurrected, but smartly. And that was sort of the very beginning of my understanding. Hey, Chloe, come up here and sit in the front. Thanks.
With Pure, you would send me chunks of pages, chapters at a time. We would talk about them. We'd talk about where it was going. That was a really different process, but also not.
Right. It was definitely more the way that I describe it is it was a lot like playing Barbies with a friend. And it was I was well, I'm going to make them do this. And Nika would be well, what if they do this instead? Or if you have, this makes it more smart.
Why is your Barbie wearing that?
I like this skirt. And it was really the beginning of what has become incredibly important for me in my work, and knowing that I have someone that I trust their judgment implicitly, and that I know she's going to, thank you, switch microphones with me when mine is messed up.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
But make smart decisions, push me to do the right things, and is ultimately not just my friend, but also looking out for the best in my work. And she's really, really, really smart and good at her job. So eventually we got, hey Hope, you can come up front too, if you want. So eventually we got it together, and I had the first third of a book, and I had an outline of what was going to happen, and Anika had her new job at Simon Pulse, and it was the first.
It was my first acquisition, yes.
So that was that. And we were on the road. And then when, I'll jump forward, so when I finished writing Pure, I was weird because I had never written a novel before, and I didn't know that I was ever going to write a novel. But when I finished, I got this itch of I want to work on something else again. But I didn't know what, and I didn't know how. So I wrote to Nika, and I was I want to write something, but I don't know what to write. And she wrote me this great email that suggested several things. She knew, because she was my friend, she knew my personal history and knew that I might have something to say about love triangles at some point. She also knew that I was a poet in college, and she suggested a novel in verse, and she knew that I was the oldest of 3 sisters, and she said maybe you would have something to say about sisterhood. So the famous part of this is that I read that email, and at the time I was working on a decoupage project. So I read her email, and then I went back down and was cutting and gluing and thought, all right, love triangle, poetry, could write 3 different types of poetry, 1 for each character. And eventually that's what After the Kiss became. And then after the Kiss was done, I did Summer First and Last, which is 3 sisters at summer camp. While I was working on Summer First and Last, I liked the relationship between some of the sisters and their guy friends. And I just wanted to write more of that. I was this is really enjoyable, and I really like this, so I want to do more of that, and that's where Being Friends with Boys came from. And then when I was working on
I remember you telling me I'm going to write a book about being friends with boys, and I was and we are going to call it Being Friends with Boys.
We did. And then while I was working on Being Friends with Boys was when I heard about this murder case that captured my imagination, and that is where Criminal came from. So now you're up to speed. And we're going to just talk a little bit about Criminal. We have some questions for each other, and then I'll read some and open it up a little bit for you guys. I don't want to keep you here forever, but we have a lot to yak about. So,
which is funny, when I was listening to Krista's great intro and how she was talking about Criminal and saying, you know, dark and edgy, and how this is a much more intense novel from Terra. And when I first acquired this book and was pitching it to my publisher and talking with people about what it was going to be, I was really positioning this is something really different from Terra McVoy. And I was using those same words to explain why. And then the further we got into this book's existence, the more I came to feel like, oh, this is something really essentially Terra McVoy. This has the same heart, the same essence as your other books. I feel like one of the things that you do exceptionally well is just get to the emotional truth of your characters immediately. And this book has that, and it has the same kinds of hard choices that your characters in your other books make, but in so much more extreme circumstances. Which makes me want to talk to you and ask you about how you get to know these girls that you write about, and the boys who surround them. Sing up the mic. It's taking it away from me. Here, I'll finish the question and get it back at you. How you get to know these girls? Do they come to you? Do you start with a scene? Do you start with an emotion? Do you start with a relationship? Here, did you start with the murder and knowing that was going to happen? Do you know them in one piece, or do you know one element of them and then the other pieces come together?
That is a really good question. And it's different, like, sort of every time. Like, Charlotte sort of sprang like Venus full from my head from Being Friends with Boys. I just like knew her right away in terms of her voice and how she dressed and all of that. And then I had to kind of figure out what was her family life like. For Nikki, I mean, the whole point of writing Criminal is I'd heard about this murder case where this guy had killed his girlfriend's parent in like broad daylight, and that he maybe had an accomplice who was another girl he was also romantically involved with. And I just kept being fascinated by this other girl. I was just like, who would do that? Who would do that? And like, what would your situation have to be? And so I think I just started with that question with Nikki of like, who would you have to be? Like, okay, you obviously would have to be totally obsessed with your boyfriend. What sort of life situations make you really obsessed with your boyfriend? Well, it means you don't really have anything else. So that means you don't have friends. Why don't you have friends? Well, probably because you're not going to school. Because if you're going to school, not very many people have 0 friends in high school, you know? So then, like, okay, so what does that mean if she didn't go to high school? And so then I just started working backwards from there. And I also...
Is that where we got Bird? Bird, the best friend in this book, is my favorite.
Yeah, Bird is my favorite too. No, because, you know, like I said, you know, nobody has 0 friends. Mm-hmm. Nobody does. Like, even the biggest loner in school has got somebody, like a piano teacher, and it might not be a great life, and it might not be popular high school football team life, but everybody has to have somebody. And I needed Nikki to have somebody, and I also needed Nikki to have somebody who would, I always need... My graduate instructor in graduate school said, Terry, your characters never want to do anything and you listen to them too well. So I always need my main characters to have other characters to like push them into action. And I needed somebody, because Nikki, if she had her way, would protect Dee from this murder until they were both dead.
And you would protect Nikki. You did in your first draft.
I did.
That's a classic Terra first draft thing. My job as the editor is to push you to make things harder for these characters that you know and love so well. We did that in Pure. That's one of the reasons we killed off the 6th girl, took her out of the book, was to make Tabitha, the main character, have to be the one making the really hard choices and perhaps the big mistakes. Yeah. Nikki, you started with her making a huge mistake. We knew that would happen. So what we had to do was make Bird, her best friend, an even more central character, bring out the heart of that relationship, and make Nikki betray her in bigger and bigger ways. Right. When your editor makes you take away that safety net for a character that you love, do you feel like I'm taking away your safety net, or does it free you to jump?
You're taking away my safety net, but it frees me to jump. You know, I mean, it's just like, I mean, it's very much a feeling of like, and that's just the way that I've always felt. I mean, everybody asks me about the editorial process, like, well, does it suck when Anica tells you have to cut these paragraphs? And I'm like, no, because I agree with her, and I believe her, and it's sort of, it's just having, it's like, it's not exactly like you telling me makes me know I can do it, but it's like you telling me makes me know I can do it. You know, I mean, it's just like, oh, this person believes that this needs to happen, and so I'm gonna make it happen, and it can happen, and it's right. You know, I mean, so it is that way, but it's not ever a bad thing, I don't think.
Yeah.
And it helps me grow as a writer. You know, I mean, I think that's another thing that I value so much about that. And what I encourage about any editor-writer relationship is that it really does, it's like a tomato stake to your tomato plant. There's only so high that you're going to go without the support and someone pushing you and asking you those questions.
No one has ever called me a tomato steak
You're
before.
my tomato stake.
But like I said, I do feel like now that we have this book, I feel like it comes back to the things that you deal with. You deal with tough morality issues. And I'm wondering how you balance the wisdom and perspective that you have as an adult writing a character like Nikki, who is in that teen space. I mean, we always say YA isn't a reading level, it's a point of view. It means you're in that perspective, and teenagers are uniquely in the minute, in the moment, not looking ahead the way that we have to as grown-ups. And so that makes everything more intense, everything more urgent, everything more immediate, big and small. But you're a grown-up writing all of this, and you can see the bigger picture, not only of the mistakes that are being made, that need to be made, and the growth that's happening, but so how do you write the story of somebody like Nikki or somebody like Tabitha from Pure and introduce that sense of when you're a grown-up, maybe you'll feel this way about it, without stepping out of that and getting it all preachy or at all pushing a message? How do you let the characters find that themselves?
Well, I have this front row of people up here to keep me balanced, and some back there, some of them, because I have teenage friends in my life, and I respect them a lot, and I really respect where they are as people and what they're going through and doing, and I would never want to condescend to them, and because, I mean, the reason that I write YA, which I never intended to do, I'm not like set out to do this, but I think that being a teenager, Lucas Klaus said this, and it really is true, that being a teenager is the only single-handed one experience that every single human being on this planet goes through together. It's a grand unifier of humanity, and it's also a really unique time of life, and it's time when your brain is developing in weird ways, and your body is changing every 10 minutes, and you're going through tons of things for the first time, and I just have a lot of respect for that, and so want to make sure that I'm giving my characters that same kind of respect and acknowledging what they're going through without,
Do you have them in mind as readers when you're writing? Who are you writing for? Yes?
Yeah.
Thinking of those girls.
Yeah, I have been since the beginning, since the beginning of Pure. I always think about my teenage friends, and I try to, I don't know about this book though, girls, but I try to think, I try not to put anything in this book that I would not talk to them about to their faces, and wouldn't want them to talk to me about, maybe.
Is what you want your teen readers to take away from the book different from what you want other adult readers to take away?
No, not necessarily. I just think that they'll have a different viewpoint on it. The adults. One thing that I've seen a lot in the comments about, and I was afraid of this, adults read Criminal and they're like, I just wanted to shake Nikki and tell her, but it's like, she can't see. You can see because you're a grown-up that she's making these bad decisions, but she can't see because she's in it. Mm-hmm. So I think I lost track of the question there for a second, but
okay. Okay. Can we talk about boys for a minute?
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's really interesting thinking about the evolution from Pure to Criminal, as you put it. Thinking about the evolution from Jake, the almost too perfect boyfriend in Pure, one of the things we did editorially was take out all these long passages in Pure where Jake is just asking Tabitha about her emotions and what's happening with her friends. And those were really lovely to read, but this is not a fantasy novel. And then, we go from there to After the Kiss, where we have Alec, who, he's kissed someone else. He's not a perfect boy, but he's still a jock with a poet's heart. I mean, come on. And then Duncan and James and Summer, let alone that whole slew of boys to choose from in being friends with boys. And they are imperfect boys. She is their friend. She sees their faults. But then we get to D, and D is the worst boy you could possibly be with. He is the dangerous boy. And I wondered how it was for you writing a boy where all your other 4 books, all of the boys we might have crushes on or want to be friends with, it's easy to see why these girls are drawn in. How was it? But the crucial thing about Nikki and Criminal is we need to relate to that she is willing to throw away everything and everyone for this boy who the reader can see immediately does not deserve anything from anyone, let alone her. And what is the process of writing a boyfriend like that and trying to keep Nikki's love for him relatable? What is that like? How is that process different?
Well, it is different. It was a little bit easier with this book because I already knew that he had committed a murder, and a pretty horrendous one. So I had that to work with. But also, my favorite, so I love superhero movies, and my favorite stuff about a good superhero movie is the bad guy is a person too. And I just think that, people say stuff like, no one thinks they're a bad person. No one really thinks they're bad, even if they're a serial killer, horrible, an awful person. No one thinks they're a bad person. They always have a main reason. And, because I write realistic fiction because what I'm really interested in as a writer and as a reader, honestly, is the amazing way you can use these weird black symbols, make them into words, make those words into sentences, and make those sentences into something that is communicated to someone that you don't even know, a real thing, and for them to really feel like this is a real person, and that's always what has interested me about this. And so even the bad guys, it is interesting to me to try to write that as a real person and make him, he's pretty despicable. There's not really anything.
But also really hot.
Yes, he is really hot. He is pretty horrible, but it was really interesting to think his dialogue in the book when he's talking, and it's he feels like he's done something awesome. And that's a yucky place to kind of be in, but also because as a writer what I'm interested in doing is getting at what I want to understand and trying to put into words what is true. It was a really good challenge.
One more question? Okay. Well, let's talk about Little Shop, because we're here. You were a manager here, you're a bookseller here. This has been a part of your Atlanta community almost the entire time you've been here. And writing is a very solitary activity, but you have an editor, and you have a whole publishing house that's a team supporting you, and you have a community of writers and readers and Little Shop customers and community people that you're friends with. And I'm wondering how your experiences as a bookseller here have affected what kind of writer you are, or how do they inform or influence your writing, or how do your experiences as an author change what kind of bookseller you are?
Well, I will say that it definitely affects the bookseller that I am, because I make all of my bookseller friends be the ones to sell my books. It's really weird when someone comes up and they're like, I'm looking for something realistic or contemporary, girls and their situations. And I'm like, well, here's my friend Elizabeth Huelberg's book, and here's, all that. It's very uncomfortable for me. It's been funny this week for things to be on display, and people like, so is Terra Elan McVoy, is she a YA writer? Miss Kim was like, yeah, and she's standing right over there. So there's that. This community from day one, this store, these people. I can't talk because I'll cry. It's awesome. And it makes me a much happier writer because I have this group of people and I get to be around really smart readers, and I get to talk to really smart readers about what they want to read, and it's like, I'm stealing this while I'm selling you this book. It means I get to meet librarians and teachers, and people come in and I get to like be aware of what's out there and what's happening, and so I know that that's basically, it's like extra organic fertilizer on my writing career in some way that I probably don't even know. And yeah, as a bookseller, I'm not really sure, because I can't really separate. I've never been able to separate, and I can't, and I don't think I ever will be able to separate me from reading and writing. Like, it's just, I don't understand. It'd be like not having skin. Because I always have loved it, and so being in a place where this is, and writing, and it's all just, that I've managed to turn it into a livelihood is still the weirdest part of all of this, because it's just like, it'd be like getting paid to breathe. So I feel extra lucky and extra special, like every day that I come into work, and the people that I get to see and talk to and be with, and that then I get to write alongside of that for them and with them. One of my writing companions are over there, and these girls I've worked with. It's just amazing, and I just feel like the luckiest girl on the earth.
Will you read to us?
I will. But I'm going to ask one question first, because it's not just all about me, because I know you all will also be curious. I'm really curious how you work specifically, but also how an editor works, because what happens on my end is I slave and sweat over the draft, and then I give it to you, and then it comes out with like all this beautiful tiny handwriting, and I'm like, how does she do this? Like, keep track of the fact that I said this on page 72 and this, then do this on page 127. So just briefly, can you tell us your process, just because I'm interested, and then I'll read.
It starts with a lot of jumping and squealing and excitement because the manuscript is here, and Terra often sends hers to me in the mail with like a gold bow wrapped around it or something, so it really is like getting a present. Like, my skin has arrived. Now I get to... and then it is a slow process with a pencil. I'm an old school editor. I don't edit on the computer like a lot of people do. Me and the page, I think that physically experiencing the book is really different from reading something on screen. And I edit at about 7 pages an hour. And I sit there, and my job is to be your first honest reaction. So sometimes I'm going through cutting extra words or saying, you already said that on this page, or those little details, or wait, I don't understand what's happening here, or that kind of thing. Sometimes I'm saying, oh my goodness, I do not want him to act this way. He's such a jerk. Not because I want you to change it, but because I want you to know that that's how I experienced this moment. And I think it's almost a conversation that we're having where I'm jumping in like I do here, and then I send it back to you, and I know you'll read in that moment. And that's always worked really well for us because we were close friends before we started this process together. It's a lot of what I do with my other writers as well. I consider it a conversation, and that feedback all along is a big part of it. In terms of how I keep track of details, that's just how my brain works. I'm a looper. But one of the things that's really crucial to the editor-author relationship is trust. And as you need to have a sense that when you are sending me this creative work and trusting me with it, I'm very aware that the author is trusting me with the project that is her baby. And I consider it my baby too. And I think it's your book. But I think that kind of respect for it is key. And you need to know that I'm somebody who my job is to help you make your book the best version of itself possible. And that's different from making it how I would write it. That's different from, right? It's the best version of itself possible for the marketplace, for the world, for these characters, for everything. And that means every reaction I can share with you will help you then make the decisions of how you want a reader to experience a book. And so for us, it was easy because you knew me and you knew my voice, and I knew you and I knew your voice, and I could say to you, hey, you've got lettuce in your teeth, or I think you're using this word too many times.
Oh my God.
Right? Which is similar. Yeah. So, and with other relationships, other authors, you have to build that relationship before it really works. It's so much fun to work with you. It's so much fun.
That's where your baked goods come in handy. It's the building of the trust from the beginning. So I would like to share a little bit of what Anica helped me make the best version of Criminal with you guys. What do I need to tell you? So, yeah, I'm not going to tell you anything. Just going to start. When I opened the door, I thought at first what I was seeing wasn't real. 2 cops in uniforms, plus a detective in a suit, the one who had questioned me the other day, and another officer standing back in the yard. 2 squad cars behind them were parked on the street, with a black police van parked further down the road. "Good morning, ma'am. We're here to see Shondina Brown." Polite as he could be, the detective was, like he wasn't turning my blood to ice. "Who is it, Nikki?" Bird said, coming behind me. I heard her stop still, seeing the police. "Miss Brown," the detective said to her, looking beyond me. He held something up. "We have a warrant to search your vehicle. We're expecting that you'll cooperate." "You have a what?" Somehow Bird was past me on the stoop, jutting out her chin, looking fierce, even though she only came up to the detective's chest. "Ma'am," one of the other officers said, his tone not as polite. "I'll ask you to step down, please." I wanted to take her arm, pull her into the house with me, but I couldn't move. Bird's hands were in fists at her sides, but her voice was low. "There's no reason you have to be over here this morning. I already told them everything I know, which is nothing. You've got no need to search nothing of my property." A small sound came out of me. "Bird." The detective moved a step down, bringing him closer to her eye level. "Miss Brown, a vehicle of this exact color and model, specifically with a symbol there on the back, was described by more than one witness during one of our investigations. We noticed the vehicle when we were in here questioning you the other day, and as this is, by your own admission and Miss Doherty's, the residence where one of our suspects was staying, I'm afraid we do have probable cause to search your car. Now, I understand you're upset, but your cooperation would be appreciated." I stared at both of them. Suspect. This man was calling Dee a suspect. I remembered his name then, Dupree. He was like this the other day too, nice as pie. Bird turned and looked at me, though she was talking to the police. Why on earth would my car be anywhere near some investigation? Not done. I just had to turn the page. Thanks, Joe Charles. I wanted to sink into the ground and disappear. Bird's eyes were on me, full of rage, and the lights on top of the police cars were spinning. They could be at Dee's house right now, doing the same kind of search. He could be arrested. There were witnesses. My whole body was water. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "Miss Brown, this shouldn't take much of your time. We'd appreciate it if you just let us begin." I expected her to scream at them, to throw herself in front of her precious Mustang, act like a crazy lady on TV, but she just made this defeated gesture toward the car and sighed, "Let me get the keys." I hadn't moved, couldn't think, couldn't believe any of this. When she came back toward the door, I stepped out of the way and found my voice, though. "Bird, you ain't speaking to me," she hissed, gliding past. She gave the detective her keys and then stood there at the top of the driveway watching them, solid and unmoving, save to bounce her baby up and down a little. I wasn't sure what to do or where to go. Were they going to search the house? Had I really gotten rid of everything? I wanted to run to my back room, check everything one more time, make sure there was nothing. But another part of me, the truly terrified part, made me stay on the top step, riveted, watching every move the police made, pulling on their gloves, sliding the seats forward, going through the compartments, opening the trunk, lifting up the floor mats, slipping their hands down in between the seat cushions. Even, of course, looking for fingerprints. A cold sweep came over me as I realized I'd forgotten to wipe down the car again after I was with Dee the other night. Would they find anything, or would it all just be a bunch of smears by now? Could they tell how old they were? Would it matter? I was so tense and so afraid that I nearly screamed when I saw the officer in the back seat drop something square and shiny into a clear plastic bag. Dee's condom wrapper, shoved between cushions in the back seat after we were together on Saturday. The earlier one from Wednesday I'd known enough to pick up and shove in my purse. But at that point I was on my guard, freaked out. But this one from that day I hadn't even thought about. Maybe I'd been too freaked out to even care, too turned on to notice. But now it mattered. Now it could make a difference. Even after the officer put it away, it still stayed burning in my mind. Dee's spit could be on there from when he tore it open. Gunpowder residue from his fingers might have lingered. I didn't know. All I thought was that this was from Saturday. Not done. And there could be anything on it. Even the smallest thing could trace him to that day, that moment, to Bird. And there they were, placing it in that bag. I almost fell to the ground. It was all I could do to stay standing up, not to plead with them, not to take it, swear to them what I didn't know. The awfulness of what I did know, and what it would mean to Dee if I said any of it, was all that kept me shocked and silent. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. So I think we can take maybe like a couple of questions if you all have them, and then I'll go downstairs and sign some books before we're going too much. Jenna?
Okay.
Well, thank you, microphone girl.
Let's see if this works. Is it gonna work? It's gonna work.
Thanks.
I think it works, man.
Okay. So
She's obviously.
Try to hold the mic as still as you can. It's okay.
okay. So Nikki's obviously in a different place than the rest of your characters have been. The rest of your main characters. Was that different emotionally writing? Just like the.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. I think part of, in the past with Charlotte and Tabitha and even Morgan to an extent, those girls I've always considered I might have been friends with or might have known, where Nikki, I would never have met her, and it was really hard for me not to judge her, which is part of what drove me to write this book, was that I think it's so easy for us to judge other people and their situation and what they do and not understand that they are people. And even if they make really, really bad choices and do really, really bad things, they're still human beings. So I needed to work to get over my own judgment of her so that I could make her into a real person and try to have some empathy for her. Thanks.
Next question.
I just wanted to know why this novel is so different, because all the other ones are about like girls who are like, they have purity rings, they are in a band, they can sing great, and like they go to summer camp and they're all normal. But this one was not even in high school, and she's a fugitive.
Right. Well put, Hannah. Thank you. I did it because I just, none of my books, not any one of them, are ones that I have chosen. They have come out of the universe and chosen me. And then it's like my job to listen and write them down. So, but also because I just couldn't, I heard about this case, and I had to sort of pay attention to myself, and I heard about this case, and I just could not stop thinking about the players. And so then I was like, well, I want to try to understand this. And I mentioned this before, but Mark Weingartner, my mentor at FSU, he said the most amazing thing in workshop, which was write what you want to understand. Don't write what you know, don't write what's true, but write what you want to understand. And this was what compelled me to write this totally bizarre, weird story that is like scary and dirty, is because I really wanted to understand who would do this and what would her circumstances really be like. This book is the result of my research, which props to the people in the audience who helped me with my research, and also my imagination, and then my powers of observation of human beings, hopefully. So let's see, we have two more. Sorry.
So I could tell, even from the few pages that you read to us, that Nikki, you really related with Nikki. Like when you wrote this book, I could really tell I related with her. I could tell who she was. I could tell in a few paragraphs
who she was, exactly how she was feeling. And that's a really big skill. So how did you manage to, obviously, you're not like her,
Right.
like you, I'm sure you have some
Well.
part of her, but, you know, on the surface, you don't seem to be fugitive. So, you know, how did you manage to be in her shoes for that?
You know, I mean, it's just, I've had a lot of, it's this thing that I tell you guys when we work, and it's what I tell everybody who wants to be an aspiring writer, and I just immerse myself in reading and how other people do it. And when I'm reading a book, like, I remember so clearly reading Prince of Tides when I was in high school, and I was sitting in the high school library, and I just read the sentence, and I was like, how does he do that? And so then I wanted to learn how to do it. And so I've just worked, I've gone to school, I've studied it, I've practiced it, I've read a lot, I've written a lot of really bad sentences myself, I've messed up at doing it, and I also just, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of tricks that they tell you about how to be a writer is, you know, like, I'm spying on you girls all the time, you know. And everyone, I'm spying on all of you, actually, you know, I mean, you just like watching, I'm fascinated by human behavior and relationships, and so I just am interested in watching that and learning from it.
How many years were you a writer before you were a published writer?
Oh, that's, well, I started writing when 30 years. I started writing when I was 4, and I didn't get published until I was 34. Yeah, so it's just practice.
So I know a lot of your books take place in Atlanta. What makes you want to make it in where you live right now?
What a good question. Awesome. Because it's a really fun area to write about. There's a lot of cool stuff here. And I don't know. And also, because I have to make up so much of the rest of the book, it's helpful to have it kind of grounded in a place that I already actually know, where I don't have to create. I mean, that was something that was really hard about the summer of First and Last, was I didn't just have to make up 3 girls and all their friends and their parents and everybody, but I also had to make up their camp, and I like drew a map and everything of like where it was, and so that was really hard. So it's nice for me to be able to just overlay. And besides, I like imagining, you know, you guys going to high school with Charlotte, or, you know, like when Camille comes into Little Shop of Stories and After the Kiss, it's also a way to kind of, for me, it's a way, even if it seems sticky sometimes, to just give a little hometown pride, you know, just a little love, you know, and for my people to be like, oh, Fellini's man, I go there, you know, or whatever.
Can we give away part of your writer secret? She doesn't just sort of write it as it comes. I mean, when you read a scene set in a school, she's written out everybody's class schedule, where the different rooms are, who passes who in the hallway, at what time, during what classes, where the shortcuts are.
Yeah.
It feels so real because it is real.
I do that. Well, thank you all so much for being here. This book is really special. Thank you all for the really good questions. So, thank you. I'm floored. Thank you.
Guys, wasn't that great? Okay, so now we're going to continue on with the party. So we're going to go downstairs, and Tara's going to be signing downstairs. If you need to buy books, we have lots of them. And if you have a little ticket in your hand, look at the last 3 numbers.